Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Now, over the weekend, the Drudge Report carried a series of articles about a possible new development in Apple's self-driving cars. Now, a lot of people are interested in what the new products from Apple are going to be, but we're looking at this not because of that, but because of government control of transportation. This is big business, it's big government, and it is big brother. It's something we should all be very concerned about. And when we look at this story that was broken by The Guardian, looking at emails going back and forth between Apple and a testing facility, I find it very alarming to see the involvement of the U.S. military in testing these. Of course, we remember that the Autobahn was created by Adolf Hitler as a way to move their military equipment very quickly from one place to the other within the country. Eisenhower had tried to move some military equipment in the Northeast, and he'd written a small book about how difficult it was and how we needed to improve that. So when he saw the Autobahn in Germany, he created the interstate system in the United States as president. Now, of course, we've enjoyed that as civilian freedom of movement. It's been a very freeing thing to have here, in spite of the fact that they use that to exert control of a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. There have been those types of things. But even Adolf Hitler, as he paraded around in a Volkswagen, the Volkswagen was a small, cheap car that made transportation more readily available to individuals. It was a freeing technology. I don't think that's going to be the case with self-driving cars. I don't think they're going to set up a separate lane for the automated cars and let them coexist with people who are driving their own cars. And neither does Elon Musk or any other people who have talked about this. They say this is going to be eventually and sooner than you think, the outlawing of human drivers. We're being told that the cars will be far safer than any human driver. Of course, they'll be programmed by humans. So we can take that with a grain of salt. Understand, this is going to be computer-driven. It will be government-controlled. It will be part of the total surveillance and control grids. Let's take a look at this story here. This is from The Guardian. They say documents confirm that Apple is building a self-driving car. They say they're scouting locations in the San Francisco Bay Area to test it. They're that far along with it. They say documents show the oft-rumored Apple car project appears to be further along than many suspected. They met secretly with officials from something called the Go-Mentum Station. This is a 2,100-acre former naval base near San Francisco. And they intercepted emails. They said, we'd like to get an understanding of timing and availability for the space and how we would need to coordinate around other parties who would be using it. And the interesting thing about this, I think, too, is The Guardian's investigation shows that they're looking quite a bit at intercepted emails that they got back and forth between these two companies. And of course, as a German minister said just last week, the vast majority of surveillance that's going on is not impacting national security. No, it is about corporate espionage. That's why there's the close connection between the NSA, the surveillance state, and these corporations that are doing it. And that's why they're setting up CISA, which is the newest instantiation of CISPA. Going on with this, they say the base is closed to the public. Now, they said this is former Navy base, but understand it is still closed to the public, and it is still guarded by the military. Think about that. Think about that. This is like an AP Hill where they did asymmetric warfare, planning on fighting Americans in American cities and urban settings, and another place that they have down at Camp Lejeune, where it's a more suburban, more rural area. This is our government training to fight Americans. This is our government now, in this case, training to control our transportation. They say it is the largest secure test facility in the world. This is their own copy from Go-Mentum Station. For the testing, validation, and commercialization of connected vehicle applications and autonomous vehicle technologies to define the next generation of transportation network infrastructure. And they're building an infrastructure that is not going to allow you to have anywhere near the kind of freedom that you have now. They say Apple has hundreds of engineers that are quietly working on automotive technologies in an anonymous building in Sunnyvale that's just a small amount of distance from their main campus. And in these emails, they say, we would like to meet in order to keep everything moving and to meet your testing schedule. In May, an Apple senior vice president, Jeff Williams, called the car, quote, the ultimate mobile device. Now, there's a lot of people who believe that Apple is not going to be doing this anytime soon. Of course, there's an article from The Verge saying you won't be driving an Apple car anytime soon. One of the things that they point out is that it takes 5 years even for an automobile company to get something into production, even though they're experienced with it, even though they have an assembly line. But going back to this other article, they point out that the CEO of Apple has met with Fiat Chrysler boss. He has toured BMW's electric car assembly line in Germany. Understand that Apple doesn't make anything. Apple doesn't make their iPhone. They don't make their computers. They subcontract this out to people who are in the business of making those things. They don't manufacture it themselves. They subcontract it out. They design this and then they subcontract it out. So if they're at the stage where they're already doing testing, this is something that is very far along. And Apple's involvement in this, I think, just underscores what big business this is, what a big potential this is. We see that Google is involved in this. We've seen Uber talking about how they were going to make private ownership of cars go away. And we've seen the mainstream press just within the last couple of weeks talk about how the autonomous self-driving taxi was going to save us from global warming. This is a full-on push from the government, from Wall Street, from the largest corporations that we have in this country. They talk about how Google, Tesla, Volkswagen, Mercedes, many other car makers are all involved in this. They have to file their applications with the California Department of Motor Vehicles. Apple does not want to do that. They want to keep this secret. And finally, this is one of the things that I thought was very interesting. The name of the place is the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. Almost sounds like something that the CIA would be involved in. And they point out that Honda has signed a $250,000 memorandum of understanding to use the facility for testing. They say that Tesla was looking at it, but listen to this account. They say, when engineers from Tesla Motors tried to tour the Gomentum station in April, armed soldiers at the base refused entry to foreign-born workers and a manager who would not divulge his social security number. And then there was an email that came back, and it said, at this point, I'll retract our interest in this test site until the process is worked out. That's what the manager said when he wrote the station, Gomentum Station's Jack Hall. It appears that The Guardian has intercepted emails on the side of Gomentum Station, so they're able to see these emails from Tesla, from Apple. Again, we see that the people at Tesla seem to be a bit more concerned about the negative consequences of technology. Here you got one of the managers who refused to give his social security number. Good for him. That's exactly what we need to see coming from people. Now, as many people are saying they don't believe that we're going to be seeing an Apple car anytime soon, that's The Verge's take on it, because they don't believe that Apple has their production lines up. And as I just pointed out, I don't expect them to use production lines. But just as an aside, Apple could very easily get into this with their liquid metal technologies alloys. This is something that is very unusual. If you haven't seen liquid metal, it has very, very unusual properties. I know some engineers who have worked there, and they had told me a long time ago that Apple had gotten exclusive rights to use liquid metal for consumer goods. Now they're talking about they have just entered their third amendment to this agreement to extend their capability to keep an exclusive right to use liquid metal. This is something that among its unique properties are its high strength, its corrosive resistance, its lightweight, and its malleability. This is a very unique substance that they're talking about here. And one of the things that would make this ideal for Apple would be that they would be able to do some very unusual looking vehicle bodies. They would be able to pour this and mold this like plastic. And yet it has metallic properties that far exceed many of the metal properties that we've seen in other metals. Now, moving on, as we look at foreign policy, we've now had some details emerge in an interview yesterday from Donald Trump. Understand that he's been running for president for quite some time, and there's very little on his website that actually talks about what he would do with policies. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment. He's put up his first issues statement, and that's about immigration. But on MSNBC, actually it was on NBC's Meet the Press, he was actually asked some questions about policy, not about his personal life. And what he had to say was very interesting. He advocates sending ground troops to fight the Islamic State. The question is it enough for a candidate to feel our pain? We need to ask, what would they do? What are their solutions? Do we want another president who is going to shed blood for oil? That is precisely what he is proposing to do. We have wounded warriors who have been taken advantage of. Why did we go to Iraq in the first place? We're not going to address that. Instead, He's proposing that we send ground troops to Iraq in order to take over the oil fields so that we can then give compensation to the troops. He's simply going to repeat the same problems. This is like rinse and repeat the mistakes of the Obama administration and the Bush administration.
Another major health threat, this one in Toledo, Ohio, where everybody in the entire city has been told not to drink the water.
Ohio's governor declaring a state of emergency.
Did you know that the average person uses about 80 to 100 gallons of water at home every single day? If there's a water emergency, will you be prepared?
Panicked residents forming long lines throughout the day.
We're here at a supermarket in Toledo. You can see the shelves empty where water once was.
To stay safe and healthy during a crisis, you must have access to safe, clean water. Water which will not be available at your local grocery store.
There's a mad dash on right now to stock up on supplies.
The ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system is a must-have for every modern, independently minded household. Protect your family's safety during an emergency. Go to InfoWarsStore.com today to purchase your ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system or call 1-888-253-3139.